No, I am not concerned with who he claims to be. He has no place here. He is a menace. The woman's voice was sharp, seething with unadulterated fury. Her face was flushed, her hair in disarray, and she was screaming at the top of her lungs in the middle of a tranquil suburban road. She gestured frantically at a tall, dark-skinned man who stood with perfect composure, his hands now cuffed behind his back. His face expressed only sorrow as he watched a little girl with golden hair sobbing uncontrollably. "Daddy, Daddy, please don't let them take my daddy." The voice of a 7-year-old child wavered with sheer terror as she reached for the man being escorted away. "He did nothing wrong. Please, he's my father." The woman who had made the emergency call, whose shrieks had summoned 3 police vehicles to this serene neighborhood, felt a sense of triumph. She had succeeded. She had finally eliminated the problem. She stood there, breathing heavily, watching with contentment as her dangerous neighbor was placed in the back of a police car. What she was unaware of was that she had just made the most significant error of her life, one she would come to regret, because the only person who could save her terminally ill child was the very man she had just ruined. The same man she had disgraced in front of the entire neighborhood. The same man whose daughter she had emotionally scarred just a few hours prior. To comprehend how everything went so catastrophically awry, we must meet the individuals whose lives would become irrevocably entwined by one woman's dreadful judgment. Because at times, the most catastrophic conflicts arise from the most benign intentions. Dr. Leon Washington was 39 years old, and if you saw him on the street, you might make certain assumptions. At 6'3", with a robust physique and arms adorned with elaborate tattoos, he could appear intimidating to those unfamiliar with his background. But those tattoos were not gang-related or prison art. They were memorials. Each one narrated the story of a fallen comrade from his deployments in Iraq, with every design meticulously selected to honor the soldiers who did not return home. Interspersed among these tributes were emblems of his other vocation: medical symbols, children's illustrations, and dates signifying lives he had saved as one of the nation's most proficient pediatric trauma surgeons. Leon had recently relocated to Oak Haven, a wealthy suburban community where the homes were immaculate, the lawns were impeccably kept, and the property values were exceptionally high. He hadn't moved there to boast or to prove a point. He had moved there for 2 straightforward reasons. The school system was superb, and his new residence was a mere 10 minutes from the Children's Medical Center, which meant he could arrive there more quickly when a child's life was at stake. But Leon was not living this life by himself. Zipping through their new house, discovering every room with the zeal only a 7-year-old could possess, was Chloe Washington. With her radiant blonde hair that shimmered in the sunlight and vivid blue eyes that gleamed with curiosity, Chloe was pure happiness personified. She was creative, vivacious, and viewed the world with boundless optimism. She would create paintings for her father, write him small messages, and trail him as if he were her personal champion. And to her, he was. Chloe had no recollection of her biological father. She had been an infant when Marine Sergeant Ben Carter was killed by an explosive device in Iraq, leaving behind a daughter he had barely had the chance to know. But Ben's closest friend, Leon, had made a vow over his dying companion's body. He had promised to love that little girl as if she were his own, to shield her, and to provide her with the life Ben would have wished for her. And Leon had fulfilled that promise every single day for 7 years. The legal adoption was completed when Chloe was 2, and she had never known any other father but Leon. She called him Daddy because that's what he was to her. She had his surname, his unwavering love, and his fierce protection. The fact that her skin was fair and his was dark, that her hair was blonde and his was black, was of no consequence to either of them. Love had forged their family, and that was all that mattered. However, not everyone perceived it that way. 2 houses down from their new home lived Brenda Miller, a 43-year-old woman whose life had been gradually deteriorating for years. Brenda was a real estate agent who had once been prosperous, but her business had suffered as her reputation for being difficult and demanding circulated throughout the community. She was also the self-designated coordinator of the Neighborhood Watch, a position she took with extreme seriousness, perhaps excessively so. Brenda resided alone in a house that was much too large for one person, a perpetual reminder of the family that once occupied those spaces. She had been divorced for 4 years, and the custody agreement still felt like a dagger in her heart. Her 8-year-old son, Noah, visited only every other weekend, spending the remainder of his time with his father and stepmother, who lived on the other side of town. Noah was a sweet, mild-mannered boy, possessing his mother's obstinate streak, but his father's benevolent heart. What Brenda kept secret from everyone was that Noah had been born with a congenital heart condition that necessitated continuous observation. Every minor chest pain, every bout of exhaustion, sent Brenda into a spiral of anxiety. She lived in perpetual fear that something would happen to him, and that fear had rendered her controlling, mistrustful, and embittered. The neighborhood also included individuals like Detective Mike Torres, a seasoned police officer who had witnessed enough genuine crime to distinguish between real threats and anxious neighbors. And there was Ms. Evelyn Reed, a 78-year-old retired school principal who had resided on Crestwood Drive for 45 years and possessed the sagacity that comes from decades of observing people's true characters emerge. But on this particular Wednesday morning, 4 days after Leon and Chloe had moved in, none of these individuals knew how their lives were about to intersect. Leon and Chloe were in their kitchen, a dusting of flour on the counters and sprinkles scattered about, adding the final touches to a batch of homemade sugar cookies. It had been Chloe's suggestion to bake something special for their new neighbors. "Daddy, can we add extra sprinkles to Mrs. Brenda's cookies?" Chloe inquired, perched on a stool to reach the mixing bowl. "Absolutely, sweetheart. That's a very kind thought," Leon answered, watching his daughter carefully add the decorations with the intense focus of a professional baker. They arranged the warm cookies in a decorative tin along with some premium tea and a handwritten card that said, "Greetings, we're your new neighbors. We look forward to becoming a part of this wonderful community, the Washington family." It was such a simple, unassuming gesture, the kind of act that friendly neighbors do for one another, the kind of act that should have been the start of a lovely friendship. Instead, it was on the verge of setting off a nightmare that would nearly decimate both families. As Leon and Chloe approached Brenda's front door, she was observing them from her living room window, and what she perceived sent her thoughts racing to the most sinister conclusions. A tall, tattooed black man walking beside a small white child. Instead of seeing a father and daughter bringing a gift to a neighbor, Brenda's mind immediately leaped to trafficking, abduction, peril. She could not entertain the notion that this might be an innocent family, because in her perception of the world, families that looked like this simply did not exist. When Leon knocked, Brenda opened the door just a crack, the security chain still fastened, peering through the opening as if anticipating a break-in. "What can I do for you?" Her tone was abrupt, suspicious, already filled with hostility before a single word had been exchanged. Leon offered a warm smile, gently placing his hand on Chloe's shoulder. "Hello, I'm Leon, and this is my daughter, Chloe. We've just moved in down the street and wanted to introduce ourselves. Brenda's eyes shifted nervously between Leon and Chloe, and you could almost see the gears turning in her mind. Something about this picture was wrong. Something didn't fit. Is that your child? The question was loaded with skepticism and accusation. Leon's smile remained, though a flicker of something changed in his eyes. He had encountered that question before, in supermarkets, at school functions, wherever they went together. Yes, she is. We brought you some cookies that Chloe helped decorate. Chloe, unaware of the building tension, chimed in brightly. I put extra sprinkles on them. Daddy says sprinkles make everything happier. But Brenda was not won over. She stared at them as if they were tricksters executing an intricate fraud. I don't take food from strangers, and I'd appreciate it if you'd remain on your own property. The refusal struck Chloe like a physical blow. Her bright smile vanished, confusion clouding her innocent face. She looked up at her father, unable to grasp why the lady didn't want their cookies. Leon felt his heart ache, but he maintained a calm and composed voice. Of course, if you should ever require anything, we're just a couple of doors down. As they walked away, Chloe whispered, Daddy? Why didn't she like our cookies? Some people just take a little longer to warm up to new friends, sweetie. That's all right. But Leon knew it wasn't about the cookies. It never was. The moment they were out of her sight, Brenda was on the phone with her acquaintance, Jessica, her voice filled with alarm and speculative theories. You will not believe what just moved in nearby. A large black man with a small white girl. Something is not right with that situation, Jessica. I'm telling you, this neighborhood is declining rapidly. Jessica, attempting to be rational, suggested, perhaps she's adopted. But Brenda's mind was already set, or something much worse. I'm going to keep a close watch on this. Someone has to look out for these children. And with those words, Brenda appointed herself as Chloe's guardian against the very man who had spent 7 years loving, nurturing, and sacrificing everything for that little girl. She had no idea that the menace she was about to scrutinize was about to become the only person in the world who could save her own child's life. What followed was not merely a neighborhood dispute. It was a methodical campaign of persecution disguised as community vigilance, and it was about to turn a little girl's world upside down. But what made it so devastating was that Brenda Miller was not just any neighbor. She was a person of influence, with connections and a reputation that could open doors and sway opinions. Brenda Miller had convinced herself she was acting righteously. In her mind, she wasn't being prejudiced or malicious. She was being watchful. She was protecting children. She was being a good neighbor. But what she was actually doing was stalking an innocent family. And it commenced the very next morning. Week 1 of Brenda's investigation started at 7:15 a.m., when she took up a position at her bedroom window with a pair of binoculars and her smartphone. She observed Leon helping Chloe prepare for school, brushing her blonde hair with the skill of a man who had done it every morning for years. She photographed him accompanying Chloe to her bus stop, holding her backpack as she skipped alongside him, chattering excitedly about her new school. Brenda zoomed in on every interaction, searching for indications of what exactly? She wasn't even certain. But in her warped reasoning, there had to be something amiss with this scene. She shadowed them, from a distance, of course. On days when the weather was inclement and Leon drove Chloe to school, she parked her car across the street and watched through her camera lens as Leon knelt to Chloe's level, listening intently as she spoke about her upcoming science fair project. She captured the moment Chloe wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed his cheek before darting into the building. To any sensible person, these images would have depicted a devoted father and daughter. but Brenda saw proof of something nefarious. The most unsettling aspect was that Brenda had concluded that Chloe needed to be rescued, not from any real harm, but from the man who loved her more than anything in the world. So Brenda took her concerns to Chloe's new school. But here is the key point about Brenda Miller. She wasn't some random neighbor lodging complaints. She was the woman who had sold properties to half the members of the school board. She was the neighborhood watch coordinator who had organized fundraising events that brought thousands of dollars to the school. She was someone whose phone calls were returned promptly and whose concerns were taken with great seriousness. When Brenda entered the main office with her binder of photographs and insisted on speaking with Chloe's teacher, the principal himself came out to welcome her. "Brenda, what can we do for you today?" She was led into a private conference room where Ms. Albright, Chloe's teacher, and Assistant Principal Roberts gathered to hear her story. Brenda presented her case as if she were arguing before a jury. "I have some concerns about one of your students," Brenda started, arranging photos on the table. "The little blonde girl, Chloe Washington? She is living with a man who, well, he doesn't seem to be a family member. You might want to verify if everything is legitimate." Albright appeared uneasy, but Assistant Principal Roberts leaned in with interest. Brenda had assisted his family in finding their ideal home just a few years prior, and he valued her judgment. "What precisely are your concerns, Brenda?" Roberts inquired, examining the photos. "Look at these pictures," Brenda said, indicating images of Leon assisting Chloe with her reading in their backyard. "Does this appear to be a normal family dynamic to you? I've been observing them, and something just doesn't seem right. The way he is constantly touching her, always hovering around her. And have you seen his tattoos? What sort of father figure has arms covered in tattoos?" Ms. Albright attempted to speak in Leon's defense. "Mr. Washington appears to be a very devoted father. Chloe talks about him constantly with clear affection and—" But Roberts interrupted her. "Brenda, you have always had excellent intuition about people. If you are concerned, we should definitely investigate this, Ms. Albright. I want you to monitor this situation closely. Document any unusual behavior, any signs that the child may be in distress." Brenda felt validated. "I'm just trying to protect that little girl. Someone needs to advocate for children who cannot advocate for themselves." Roberts nodded gravely. "You are absolutely correct. We will ensure someone is looking out for Chloe's well-being." Ms. Albright left that meeting with a knot in her stomach, but she was a relatively new teacher, and Roberts was her superior. If he instructed her to monitor the Washington family, she felt she had no other option. Week 2 brought a new level of escalation when Brenda saw Leon and Chloe at the community pool. It was a lovely Saturday afternoon, and Leon was teaching Chloe how to float on her back. He was incredibly patient with her, supporting her in the water while she practiced, celebrating when she managed to stay afloat on her own. Brenda observed from the other side of the pool as Leon meticulously applied sunscreen to Chloe's fair skin, ensuring every inch was shielded from the sun. She saw him braid Chloe's hair to keep it out of her eyes while she swam. She witnessed their easy rapport, their obvious comfort with each other, their genuine delight in spending time together. And all she could see was something suspicious. She approached the pool manager, a young man named Kevin. "Kevin, I need you to do something for me. That man over there with the little blonde girl, I don't believe they are legitimate residents. Could you please check their membership status?" Kevin, who was partly indebted to Brenda for her recommendation for his job, did not hesitate. "Of course, Brenda. I'll take care of it immediately." What transpired next was one of the most mortifying experiences of Leon's life. Pool staff, at Brenda's behest, demanded that he produce identification and proof of residency in the neighborhood, right there in front of dozens of families. Children stopped their games to stare, Parents whispered among themselves, and Chloe, bewildered and frightened by the sudden attention, clung to her father's leg. "Is there an issue?" Leon asked calmly, though his heart was pounding. "Just a routine check, sir," Kevin said, although his tone implied it was anything but routine. "We need to see your membership card and proof of residence." Leon calmly provided all the necessary documents, his military background helping him to maintain his composure, even as he felt the gazes of every parent at the pool. But the harm had been done. Brenda's concerns had been publicly validated by the pool staff's intervention, and now everyone was viewing the Washington family with suspicion. "Daddy, why did that man need to see your card?" Chloe whispered as they gathered their belongings to depart. "Sometimes adults have to show their ID, sweetie. It's nothing to be concerned about." But Leon was concerned. He could sense the change in how people regarded them, how conversations ceased when they approached. Brenda's influence was spreading like a toxin through the community. Week 3 was when Brenda's actions crossed from being irritating to perilous, and her connections amplified the devastating impact. She lodged several noise complaints with the city, and because she knew someone in the code enforcement department, those complaints were taken seriously. City officials actually came to investigate the disturbances from the Washington house, which turned out to be Chloe's violin practice. 30 minutes each afternoon of a 7-year-old learning "Mary Had a Little Lamb." But Brenda's most damaging act was to call Child Protective Services, and here again, her connections made all the difference. "I have concerns about a living situation in my neighborhood," she reported to the CPS hotline. "A small white child is living with a black man who claims to be her father. I'm the neighborhood watch coordinator, and I have been documenting some troubling behavior. I believe someone should investigate immediately." The fact that Brenda identified herself as the neighborhood watch coordinator lent her report added weight. CPS took her concerns seriously and initiated a full investigation. Brenda also began to trail them everywhere. To the grocery store, to father-daughter dances, to the park. She took photographs constantly, compiling what she thought was a case file, but which was actually evidence of her own obsessive behavior. "I'm not making any definitive statements," she would tell other parents, "but the school is monitoring that situation and CPS has already been contacted. I'm just saying we should all be vigilant for our children." And through it all, Chloe began to change. The cheerful, confident little girl who had moved to Oak Haven was becoming withdrawn and anxious. She started asking questions that broke her father's heart. "Daddy, why does that lady always take pictures of us? Why don't the other children want to play with me anymore? Did I do something wrong?" Leon found himself having conversations that no parent should ever have to have with their 7-year-old child. "Some people are not accustomed to families that look like ours, sweetie," he explained one evening as they sat on her bed. "But love is what makes a family, not what we look like. You are my daughter in every single way that counts, and nothing anyone says or does can alter that." But even as he comforted Chloe, Leon was wrestling with his own anguish. The community he had hoped would embrace his daughter was turning against them, based on one woman's prejudice and paranoia. And because Brenda had influence and connections, her poison was spreading faster and deeper than it ever could have otherwise. Brenda's campaign of harassment was about to reach a frightening climax, and what happened next would demonstrate just how perilous it is when prejudice is combined with power and when fear eclipses common sense. The knock on Leon's door arrived on a Tuesday morning while Chloe was at school. When he opened it, he was met by a woman in a formal suit holding a clipboard and a badge that made his blood run cold. "Dr. Washington, I'm Amanda Evans from Child Protective Services. We've received a report regarding your daughter, and I need to perform a welfare check." Leon felt the ground shift beneath him. He had been anticipating this since Brenda's harassment had intensified, but being prepared for it didn't lessen the devastating blow. "Of course," he said, stepping back to allow her inside. "Whatever you need to do." The inquiry was meticulous and intrusive. The caseworker inspected every room of their home, searching for any sign of neglect or abuse. She examined Leon's adoption records, his medical qualifications, and his military service history. She posed probing questions about his relationship with Chloe, their daily schedule, and their family background. The caseworker remained in their home for 3 hours, and by the end, her initial suspicion had turned into something akin to indignation. "Dr. Washington," she said, gathering her files, "it is evident this was a malicious report. Chloe is clearly loved and well cared for. Your home is spotless, your relationship with your daughter is wholesome and appropriate, and there is absolutely no evidence of any misconduct. I am sorry you were subjected to this." Leon thanked her for her diligence, but the damage was already done. That night, Chloe experienced nightmares for the first time in years, waking up in tears, asking if someone was going to separate her from her daddy. But Brenda was not done. If individual complaints were ineffective, she would mobilize the entire neighborhood to support her cause. Brenda organized what she termed a community safety meeting, distributing flyers to every house on their street and posting announcements on all the neighborhood social media pages. The meeting was set for the following Thursday evening at the community hall with an agenda that featured protecting our children and upholding neighborhood standards. Dozens of residents crowded into the community hall that evening, many of them genuinely worried about safety based on Brenda's alarming invitations. Brenda had prepared a presentation with photos, diagrams, and what she labeled as evidence of the threat residing among them. The breaking point occurred that very afternoon. Leon had decided to use the weekend to teach Chloe some essential life skills, starting with vehicle maintenance. He had just changed the oil in their SUV and was now demonstrating how to change a tire. "Every person should know basic car care, sweetheart," Leon explained as he showed her how to properly operate a car jack. "These are important skills that will serve you well when you are older." Chloe, dressed in her little pink coveralls and safety glasses that were too large for her face, was completely engrossed in the lesson. She giggled as she attempted to loosen a lug nut with a wrench that was nearly as big as she was, while Leon patiently guided her hands and explained each step. It was a perfect father-daughter bonding moment, a loving parent imparting practical knowledge to his child while they enjoyed a shared activity. But through Brenda's distorted perspective, she witnessed something entirely different. "He's teaching that poor child criminal skills," she muttered to herself, grabbing her phone. "This is probably how trafficking rings operate. They teach children to help them steal cars." Brenda's paranoia had reached its absolute zenith. In her mind, a father teaching his daughter basic car maintenance was evidence of criminal instruction. A man showing a child how to change a tire was preparation for auto theft. Without a second thought, Brenda dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? "There's a suspicious black man with a white child on Crestwood Drive," Brenda said, her voice trembling with manufactured urgency. "I think she might be in danger. He's teaching her to tamper with vehicles. I think he might be involved in car theft or human trafficking." "Ma'am, can you describe what you're seeing?" "He has the child helping him with tools, working on cars, teaching her criminal skills. Someone needs to get here immediately before something terrible happens to that little girl." As Brenda made her call, Leon continued to teach Chloe about tire pressure and proper jack placement, completely oblivious that his neighbor's racism and paranoia were about to shatter both of their lives. But here is what Brenda did not know, what she could not have imagined in her wildest fantasies. In just a few hours, her own son's life would be hanging in the balance, and the only person in the world who could save him would be the same man she was about to have arrested. The wail of sirens on a quiet Saturday afternoon sent a shiver through the entire neighborhood. 2 squad cars pulled up in front of the Washington House, their flashing red and blue lights casting an ominous glow on the pristine suburban street. Neighbors began to emerge from their homes, attracted by the disturbance, their phones already out and recording. Leon looked up from the tire he was teaching Chloe to change, a mix of confusion and dread washing over him. He knew immediately this was Brenda's doing, but the sight of police cars still made his heart pound. Chloe, seeing the officers approach, instinctively took cover behind her father, her small hands clutching his shirt. "Officers," Leon said calmly, standing up slowly with his hands in plain sight. His military training took over. Never make sudden movements, always be respectful, de-escalate when possible. "Is there a problem?" The leading officer, Sergeant Miller, approached with his hand resting casually on his belt. "Sir, we received a report of suspicious activity involving a vehicle and a child. Yes. Can you tell us what's happening here?" Leon gestured towards the SUV with its partially removed tire and the tools laid out neatly beside it. "I'm teaching my daughter basic car maintenance. We were changing a tire." "And this is your daughter?" the officer asked, looking down at Chloe, who was peeking out from behind Leon. "Yes, sir. This is Chloe. I'm Leon Washington, and this is my home." Leon slowly reached for his wallet. "I can show you my identification and proof of residence." But before he could produce his documents, Brenda came rushing from her yard, practically quivering with a sense of vindicated excitement. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," she called out, brandishing a manila folder filled with her surveillance photos. "I'm the one who called. I've been documenting the situation for weeks." Brenda approached the officers with the confidence of someone who believed she was finally being vindicated. "Something's not right about him having that white child. I've been watching them, and there are so many red flags. You need to check if she's really his daughter." The second officer, Officer Collins, turned to Leon. "Sir, do you have documentation of guardianship or custody?" Without a moment's hesitation, Leon reached into his back pocket and produced a well-worn leather wallet. From it, he pulled out several official documents, kept there precisely because he had learned to anticipate such moments. Adoption papers, court orders, custody documents, everything is legal and legitimate. Officer Collins reviewed the paperwork while Brenda continued her frenzied explanations. "Look at these photos," she insisted, spreading the pictures across the hood of the patrol car. "He's always touching her, always following her around, and today he was teaching her to use tools on cars. What innocent father teaches a child criminal skills?" Leon felt his jaw tighten, but he forced himself to remain composed. "Officer, I was teaching my 7-year-old daughter how to change a tire. It's a basic life skill." "Basic life skill?" Brenda sneered. "Or preparation for auto theft. I've called Child Protective Services. I've reported him to the school, and I have documented weeks of suspicious behavior." Chloe, who had been listening to this exchange with increasing distress, finally spoke up. "Daddy didn't do anything wrong. He was just teaching me about cars, like he teaches me about everything else." But Brenda seized on this. "See? Even she calls him Daddy. That's not normal. A white child calling a black man Daddy? Something is seriously wrong here." The officers exchanged a look. Leon's documents seemed to be in order, but the situation was unusual enough, and Brenda's accusations serious enough that they felt they had to proceed with caution. "Sir," Sergeant Miller said, "we're going to need you to come with us to the station for questioning, just to verify everything and make sure we have the complete picture." "Am I being arrested?" Leon asked, his heart sinking as he saw the terror wash over Chloe's face. "You are being detained for questioning," Miller replied, reaching for his handcuffs. until we can confirm the legitimacy of the custody situation. What happened next would stay with Leon for months. As the cold steel clamped around his wrists, Chloe began to scream, "Daddy, don't take my daddy! He didn't do anything wrong!" Her voice broke with terror, the same raw fear she had felt when she learned of her biological father's death. "Please, he's my daddy. He takes care of me." Leon felt his heart break as he was escorted to the patrol car. "Please," he said to the officers, "you're frightening her." But Brenda was not finished. As neighbors gathered and phones recorded every moment, she felt compelled to justify her actions one last time. "See how she's reacting?" Brenda shouted to anyone who would listen. "That is not a normal father-daughter relationship. She's been conditioned to call him Daddy. This is exactly what I have been trying to prevent." As the patrol car drove away with Leon in the back, Chloe collapsed into Ms. Reed's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. The image of that little blonde girl crying for her father as he was taken away in handcuffs would go viral within hours. But the full irony of the situation was still to come. At the police station, Detective Mike Torres was reviewing Leon's case when his phone rang. The caller ID displayed Children's Medical Center. Never a good sign on a Saturday evening. "Detective Torres." "Detective, this is Helen Ramirez, the administrator at the Children's Medical Center. We have a critical emergency. Dr. Leon Washington was scheduled to perform urgent surgery on an 8-year-old boy in cardiac distress. The child was just admitted, and Dr. Washington is our only pediatric trauma surgeon on duty tonight. Where is he?" Torres felt his blood run cold. "Did you say Dr. Washington?" "Yes, Dr. Leon Washington, head of pediatric trauma surgery. We have been trying to reach him for the last hour, but his phone is going directly to voicemail. This child is dying, Detective. We need Dr. Washington here immediately." Torres looked through the window of the interrogation room at Leon, who was sitting quietly with his head in his hands. The black man with the white daughter? The one brought in on suspicious activity charges? "I don't know about a daughter, but Dr. Washington is African American, yes." "Detective, what is happening? Why do you have one of our most esteemed surgeons in custody?" The full gravity of the situation hit Torres like a physical blow. "I'll call you back," he said, ending the call and rushing to the interrogation room. But the cruel irony was just beginning to surface. At that exact moment, across town at her ex-husband's house, Brenda was enjoying a rare quiet Saturday when her phone rang. The caller ID showed her ex-husband's name, and she almost ignored it. Their conversations rarely went well. "What is it, Mark?" she answered with annoyance. "Brenda, you need to get to the Children's Medical Center right now. Noah collapsed during his baseball game. They're saying it's his heart. They're saying it's serious." The words struck Brenda like a ton of bricks. Her son, her baby, the only thing in her life that truly mattered, was in the hospital. She dropped everything and raced across the city, her mind replaying every worst-case scenario. As she burst through the emergency room doors, she found Mark and his wife, Laura, in the waiting area, both looking pale and terrified. "Where is he? What happened?" Brenda demanded. "He just fell on the field," Mark said, his voice trembling. "One minute he was running, the next he was on the ground, clutching his chest. The paramedics said his heart stopped for almost 2 minutes. Brenda felt her world spin out of control. Where are the doctors? Who is treating him? A nurse approached them with a grim expression. "Are you Noah Miller's family?" "I'm his mother," Brenda said, grabbing the nurse's arm. "Please tell me he's going to be okay." "Ma'am, your son is in critical condition. He needs immediate surgery to repair a congenital heart defect that we believe has been worsening for some time. We are trying to locate our pediatric trauma surgeon, but there has been some sort of delay." "What kind of delay?" Brenda asked, panic rising in her throat. "Get him here, whatever it costs, whatever you need to do." "Ma'am, Dr. Washington is the best pediatric surgeon in the state. He's saved hundreds of children's lives, but we cannot locate him at the moment, and your son cannot wait much longer." Brenda felt as if she were drowning. Her son was dying, and the surgeon who could save him was missing. She had no idea that at that very moment, the missing surgeon was sitting in a police interrogation room because of her phone call, because of her prejudice, because of her inability to see past the color of his skin. The devastating irony was complete. But Brenda would not learn the truth for several more excruciating hours. Back at the police station, Detective Torres was piecing together a picture that made him sick to his stomach. Dr. Leon Washington was not just innocent. He was one of the city's most respected medical professionals. The man they had in custody had saved over 300 children's lives in just 5 years at the Children's Medical Center. He had recently moved to Oak Haven specifically to be closer to the hospital so he could respond more quickly to emergency calls. The suspicious man with the stolen white child was actually a decorated war veteran who had adopted his deceased best friend's daughter and was raising her with a love and dedication that should have been obvious to anyone who spent 5 minutes with them. And now, because of one woman's racist assumptions and the system's readiness to believe her, a child was dying, while the only surgeon who could save him sat in a police station. Torres grabbed his keys and ran towards the interrogation room. He had to get Dr. Washington to that hospital immediately. But he had no idea that the child whose life hung in the balance was the son of the very woman who had destroyed Dr. Washington's evening, traumatized his daughter, and nearly cost an 8-year-old boy his life. The universe was about to deliver a lesson in consequences that Brenda Miller would never forget. Brenda burst through the automatic doors of the Children's Medical Center like a woman possessed, her hair disheveled, her makeup smeared from crying during the frantic drive across town. She had broken every speed limit, run red lights, and abandoned her car in a no-parking zone, because nothing mattered except getting to her son. Brenda was escorted to the pediatric waiting area, where she found Mark and Laura sitting in plastic chairs, both looking like they had aged 10 years in the past hour. The moment Mark saw her, he stood up, his face grim. "Brenda, they're saying Noah needs immediate heart surgery. There's some kind of defect that's been getting worse, and today it gave out." Brenda felt her knees buckle. Heart surgery? But he's only 8. He was fine this morning. Laura, Mark's wife, who had always been kind to Brenda despite their complicated history, reached out and took her hand. "The doctors say he has the best chance with their pediatric trauma surgeon. They keep mentioning Dr. L. Washington. Apparently, he's some kind of miracle worker with children." A nurse approached their small group, her expression serious but professional. "Mrs. Miller? I'm Jennifer, Noah's nurse. Your son is stable for now, but he needs surgery within the next hour. Dr. Washington is our best pediatric surgeon, but he's not here yet." Brenda grabbed the nurse's arm. "What do you mean he's not here? Where is he? Get him here now. I don't care what it costs." "Ma'am, we've been trying to reach Dr. Washington for the past 2 hours. There seems to be some kind of emergency that's prevented him from getting to the hospital. We're doing everything we can to locate him." Brenda felt panic rising in her chest like a tidal wave. 2 hours? My son has been here for 2 hours and the surgeon isn't even here? What kind of hospital is this? "Mrs. Miller," the nurse said gently, "Dr. Washington has never missed an emergency call in 5 years. Something very unusual must have happened. But please know that when he gets here, your son will be in the best possible hands. Dr. Washington has saved over 300 children's lives. As the nurse walked away, Brenda paced the waiting room like a caged animal. Her son was dying, and the one person who could save him was missing. She called everyone she could think of: hospital administrators, board members she knew through her real estate connections, anyone who might have influence. After what felt like an eternity, Helen Ramirez, the hospital administrator, approached Brenda with a grave expression. "Mrs. Miller, I need to speak with you privately." Brenda followed her to a small conference room, her heart pounding. "Please tell me you found Dr. Washington. Please tell me he's on his way." Helen closed the door and took a deep breath. "Mrs. Miller, we've located Dr. Washington. But I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you live on Crestwood Drive in Oak Haven?" Brenda blinked in confusion. "Yes, but what does that have to do with anything? Where is the doctor?" "Did you call the police today about a suspicious man with a child in your neighborhood?" The question hit Brenda like a physical blow. Her face went completely white as the horrible, impossible truth began to dawn on her. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. No, that can't be. The man with the little girl. Oh God, what have I done?" Helen's expression was a mixture of professional composure and barely contained disgust. "Dr. Leon Washington has been in police custody for the past 3 hours because someone in his neighborhood called 911 claiming he was involved in suspicious activity with a child. That child is his legally adopted daughter, and he was teaching her basic car maintenance in their own driveway." Brenda collapsed into a chair, the full weight of her actions crashing down on her like an avalanche. "I thought I was protecting. Oh God, my son is going to die because of what I did." "Dr. Washington is being released as we speak, and should be here within 20 minutes, Helen continued, her voice cold. "But Mrs. Miller, what you did today nearly cost your own child his life. I hope you understand the gravity of that." Brenda was hyperventilating now, her world spinning out of control. The man she had stalked, harassed, and ultimately had arrested was the only person who could save Noah's life. The dangerous criminal she had been so desperate to remove from her neighborhood was a pediatric surgeon whose entire career was dedicated to saving children. She had destroyed an innocent family, traumatized a little girl, and nearly killed her own son with her prejudice and hatred. 25 minutes later, the elevator doors opened, and Leon Washington stepped out, still wearing the clothes he had been arrested in, his hair slightly disheveled, exhaustion written across his face. He moved with the focused urgency of a man who knew a child's life depended on him getting to an operating room as quickly as possible. Brenda looked up from where she sat, sobbing in the hallway, and recognized him immediately. This was the man whose life she had tried to destroy just hours earlier. The man she had called dangerous. The man she had convinced herself was a threat to children. And now he was her son's only hope. Leon saw her sitting there, tears streaming down her face, and he recognized her too. For just a moment, their eyes met across the hallway, and Brenda saw something in his expression that made her feel even worse. Not anger, not hatred, but sadness and disappointment. She stood up shakily and approached him, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, I know what I did. I know I was wrong about everything, but please, don't let my son pay for my mistakes." Leon looked at this woman who had spent weeks trying to destroy his family, who had traumatized his daughter, who had cost him hours that could have been spent saving lives. And without a moment's hesitation, he said, "Ma'am, I took an oath to save lives. Your son will get the best care possible." The surgery took 4 agonizing hours, Brenda waited in the hallway, surrounded by Mark and Laura, who had gradually learned the devastating truth about her actions. Mark was furious, Laura was disgusted, and Brenda was consumed by a guilt so profound it felt like it might kill her. "You spent weeks stalking and harassing the man who's now trying to save our son's life?" Mark's voice was quiet, but his anger was palpable. "Brenda, what is wrong with you?" "I thought I was protecting children," Brenda whispered. "I thought something was wrong with that family." "The only thing wrong was in your head," Laura said, her usual kindness replaced by cold disgust. "You nearly killed Noah with your racism and paranoia." As the hours ticked by, other people began arriving at the hospital. Ms. Reed appeared in the waiting room, and with her was Chloe Washington, the little girl Brenda had convinced herself needed protection from her own father. Chloe, despite everything Brenda had put her family through, walked directly over to where Brenda sat crying and said in her sweet, 7-year-old voice, "Are you okay? Your little boy is going to be fine. My daddy saves kids all the time." Brenda looked down at this beautiful, innocent child, the same child she had convinced herself was in danger, the same child she had used as justification for her harassment campaign, and felt something inside her completely shatter. "Sweetie," Brenda whispered through her tears, "I am so sorry for what I did to you and your daddy. I was wrong about everything." Chloe considered this with the serious expression children get when they're trying to understand adult problems. "It's okay," she said finally. "Daddy says sometimes people are scared of things they don't understand, but that doesn't make them bad people. It just makes them confused." Brenda realized she was looking at a child who had more wisdom, more grace, and more humanity in her 7-year-old heart than Brenda had shown in her entire adult life. At 2:17 a.m., Leon Washington emerged from the operating room, pulling off his surgical cap and mask. His scrubs were stained with sweat, and exhaustion was written across every line of his face. But he was smiling. Brenda jumped to her feet, her heart in her throat. "Is he—" "Noah is going to be fine," Leon said, his voice hoarse from the long surgery. "The procedure went perfectly. We repaired the defect, and his heart is already showing improved function. He should make a full recovery." Brenda collapsed with relief. But as she looked at this man who had just saved her son's life, the same man she had tried to destroy, she realized that some mistakes can never truly be undone. The aftermath of that night would prove that actions have consequences, but also that redemption is possible for those brave enough to face the truth about themselves and do the hard work of becoming better. Within 48 hours of Noah's surgery, Brenda Miller's world began to collapse around her. The video footage of Leon being arrested while teaching his daughter to change a tire had gone viral, spreading across social media platforms with the hashtag #JusticeForDerWashington. The contrast between the peaceful father-daughter moment and Brenda's hysterical accusations was so stark, so obviously wrong, that it sparked national outrage. The legal consequences came swiftly. Brenda was charged with filing false police reports, harassment, and making fraudulent claims to Child Protective Services. Each charge carried serious penalties, but more devastating than any legal punishment was the complete destruction of her reputation and livelihood. The real estate board moved quickly to revoke her license after the story broke. No family would ever trust her to represent them in buying a home, and no agency would risk their reputation by employing her. Her income vanished overnight. The neighborhood that had once tolerated and sometimes supported her suspicions now turned against her completely. Parents who had listened to her warnings about Leon now realized they had been complicit in the harassment of an innocent family. The shame was overwhelming, and they dealt with it by ostracizing Brenda entirely. She became a pariah, on her own street. But perhaps the most devastating consequences were the personal ones that unfolded in the days following Noah's surgery. Noah woke up the day after his operation to find Leon checking his chart, monitoring his recovery with the same careful attention he gave to every patient. "Are you the doctor who fixed my heart?" Noah asked in the small, scratchy voice of a child who had been through major surgery. Leon smiled warmly, the same gentle expression he used with Chloe when she was hurt or scared. "I am. How are you feeling, buddy?" "Better," Noah said. Then his face grew serious. "Mom said she was mean to you. I'm sorry." Leon sat down beside Noah's bed, his expression kind but firm. "Noah, you don't need to apologize for anyone else's actions. You're a good kid, and the only thing you need to focus on is getting better." But Noah, with the startling honesty that only children possess, continued. "Mom was wrong about you, wasn't she? You're not scary at all. You're nice." "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes," Leon said carefully. "The important thing is learning from them." When Brenda was finally allowed to see Noah, their reunion was bittersweet. Her relief at seeing her son alive and recovering was overwhelming, but it was tempered by the growing understanding of what her actions had almost cost them both. The conversations that followed were among the most difficult of Brenda's life. Mark's words cut the deepest. "Your racism almost killed our son, Brenda. Noah could have died because of your hatred. Do you understand that? The man you spent weeks trying to destroy is the only reason our child is alive." Laura, who had always tried to maintain peace for Noah's sake, was equally blunt. "Brenda, we can't trust you around Noah anymore. What if your prejudice affects his friendships? What if you teach him to hate people who are different from him?" Even Noah himself, as he recovered, asked questions that pierced Brenda's heart. "Mommy, why were you mean to Dr. Washington? And why were you mean to Chloe? She seems really nice. Can she be my friend?" But perhaps the most devastating conversation came when Brenda's own mother arrived at the hospital. Eleanor Miller was 75 years old and had lived through the civil rights movement. She had raised Brenda to be better than this. "I'm ashamed of what you've become," her mother said quietly as they sat in the hospital cafeteria. "I thought I raised you to see people as individuals, not to judge them by the color of their skin. You nearly killed your own grandchild with your hatred." Brenda tried to defend herself, to explain her fears and concerns, but her mother cut her off. "There is no explanation for what you did, Brenda. There is no excuse. You saw a loving father with his daughter and chose to see something sinister because of your own prejudice. That's on you, and you need to figure out how to live with that." The legal proceedings moved forward, and Brenda found herself facing the very real possibility of jail time. Her lawyer advised her to prepare for the worst-case scenario. But then something unexpected happened. Leon Washington requested a meeting with the prosecutor. "I don't want to see Ms. Miller go to prison," he told the district attorney. "What she did was wrong, and there need to be consequences. But I believe in redemption. I believe people can change if they're willing to do the work. I believe people can change," Leon explained to the prosecutor, "but only if they're willing to do the hard work of examining their hearts and confronting their prejudices. Prison will just make her bitter. Community service might make her better." Brenda was overwhelmed by this unexpected grace. The man she had tried to destroy was offering her a path to redemption instead of revenge. The transformation didn't happen overnight. For the first few weeks of her community service at the Children's Medical Center, Brenda was resentful and defensive. She performed her duties, reading to young patients, helping with art therapy, organizing playrooms, but her heart wasn't in it. Then one day, 6 months into her service, she witnessed Leon performing emergency surgery on a 3-year-old girl who had been in a car accident. Through the observation window, she watched him work for 8 hours straight, refusing breaks, his hands steady and precise as he fought to save a child's life. The little girl survived because of Leon's skill and dedication, and as Brenda watched the parents collapse with relief and gratitude, she finally understood the magnitude of who she had tried to destroy. This wasn't just any doctor. This was a man who dedicated his life to saving children, who had given up personal relationships and social time to be available for emergencies, who carried the weight of young lives in his hands every single day. And she had tried to take him away from all the children who needed him because she couldn't see past the color of his skin. The irony became even more personal as Noah recovered and began making friends at school. His best friend quickly became Chloe Washington, the very girl Brenda had convinced herself needed protection from her own father. Watching Noah and Chloe play together, seeing their easy friendship and obvious affection for each other, Brenda was forced to confront another layer of her prejudice. Her son's closest friend was the girl she had tried to separate from her father. The child she had claimed to be protecting from Leon was actually flourishing under his love and care. 1 year after Noah's surgery, Brenda decided to write a public letter taking full accountability for her actions. The letter was published in the local newspaper and quickly went viral, but this time for positive reasons. I almost cost my own son his life because of my prejudice against the very man who saved him. I looked at a loving father and daughter and saw only what my racist assumptions told me to see. Dr. Leon Washington is a hero who has saved hundreds of children, including mine. I was the danger to children, not him. I spent weeks stalking an innocent family, filing false reports, and trying to destroy their lives because I couldn't accept that love makes a family, not the color of our skin. I called the police on a man teaching his daughter car maintenance. I reported a war hero and pediatric surgeon to Child Protective Services. I tried to turn a community against one of its most valuable members. I'm sharing this not for sympathy, but as a warning. Prejudice doesn't just hurt the people we target. It can destroy everything we love most. My racism nearly killed my own child. My hatred almost cost Noah the only surgeon who could save his life. Dr. Washington showed me grace I didn't deserve by offering me a path to redemption instead of revenge. I pray that others can learn from my mistakes before they make their own. Exactly 1 year after Noah's surgery, at Chloe's school father-daughter dance, Leon, dressed in his best suit, was dancing with Chloe, who was wearing a beautiful pink dress and beaming with joy. Brenda was dropping Noah off at the same dance. He had begged to attend so he could see his best friend Chloe. As she watched through the window, Brenda saw Leon lifting Chloe into the air, both of them laughing, surrounded by other fathers and daughters enjoying the special evening. Noah ran up to greet Chloe and Dr. Washington, and Brenda watched her son hug the man who had saved his life. Taking a deep breath, she approached them hesitantly. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," she said quietly, "but thank you for saving Noah, and I'm sorry for what I put Chloe through." Chloe looked at her father, who nodded encouragingly, then turned to Brenda with the wisdom that only children possess. "It's okay, Mrs. Brenda. Daddy says people can learn to be better." Leon looked at Brenda with eyes that held no anger, no resentment, only hope. "We all deserve a chance to grow, Brenda. I hope you find peace." As Brenda walked away from that school, watching her son dance with his friends, while being protected and loved by the very man she had once tried to destroy, she understood the final lesson of her journey. Brenda had learned this lesson at almost the ultimate cost, but she had learned it. And in that learning, in that growth, In that commitment to being better, there was hope, not just for her, but for anyone willing to confront their own prejudices and choose love over fear. The story of Leon Washington and Brenda Miller became a testament to the power of grace, the possibility of redemption, and the truth that sometimes the most profound changes come from the most devastating mistakes.